The Centers for Disease Control is claiming the authority to indefinitely apprehend and detain healthy people, en masse without appeal. And they've done so in this posting to the Federal Register. They posted this in mid-August. We have a link at the end of our blog site to this. And first, let me give you a quick summary for the video of what's going on here. Basically, as we said, the CDC is claiming the authority to indefinitely detain you, even if you're healthy, without appeal. And they do this very sneakily by the way they've set things up. They say, generally we only detain you for a short period of time, but we can apprehend and detain you indefinitely. But then once we've made a decision on whether or not to put you in isolation or quarantine or conditional release, well, then we'll give you 72 hours to ask us to change our mind. And at that point, we can still detain you indefinitely. And it's not just for individuals. They can do this for whole cities, and they want you to comment about this. There's also mention of forced vaccinations, basically trying to get you to agree to do a bunch of stuff in writing. And even if you don't agree to it, they can still arrest you for breaking the agreement. It just goes on and on. But I'll give you the detail here. So that was a summary. For those who want to pay attention a little bit further, I'll give you a little bit more detail and read the quotes to you. It says, CDC is giving itself power to forcibly apprehend people en masse and detain them indefinitely with no process of appeal. Kindly enough, they're giving the public until mid-October to comment on this newfound extra-constitutional power. And quote them, they want their comments on whether or not there are any public concerns with the absence of a specific maximum apprehension period in the regulation. Even themselves, they point out in this register that there is no maximum detention period. They can hold you forever. Of course, as would be expected from a totalitarian unconstitutional power grab, when the apprehension occurs, the individual is not free to leave or discontinue his or her discussion with the public health or quarantine officer. So you can't go, and you no longer have a right to remain silent. Moreover, the CDC would also like the public's input on the fact that their power is not limited to just individuals. Rather, they could apprehend entire cities en masse if they so desired. Quote, CDC specifically requests public comment on this proposed provision to issue federal orders to entire groups rather than individuals. Well, as one might expect, since it's impossible to give a medical exam to an entire city, the CDC will also want your comment on the fact that the proposed practice to issue federal orders, this is federal orders of isolation or quarantine, before a medical examination has taken place. So as we said at the end of this blog post, we give you a link to the Federal Register, and so that you can make your own formal comment if you wish. But they're really sneaky in how they carry this out. It's a very long read through here. But basically it works out in these three stages. The CDC's claim power follows these three stages. Stage 1, you or your city are declared pre-communicable. Basically that means you're healthy. Stage 2, this is the apprehension and detention stage. This is the one that can go on indefinitely without appeal. Once they've decided that they want to move on to an order of isolation, but there's nothing requiring them to do so, then stage 3 is an order of isolation, quarantine, or conditional release. So in stage 1, CDC defines pre-communicable stage to mean the stage beginning upon an individual's earliest opportunity for exposure to an infectious agent. The key phrase there is opportunity for exposure, not actual exposure, opportunity. As previously indicated, CDC does not need to give a medical exam to declare you or your city pre-communicable. In fact, you may be perfectly healthy, unexposed, uninfected. All that's required is for someone to say they suspect you or your city had a nebulous, general, and poorly defined opportunity for exposure. Moreover, you don't even get any due process to prove you had zero opportunity to be exposed until after the CDC has proceeded on to stage 3. The rub being, CDC can hold you or your city at stage 2, that's the apprehension stage, with no appeal by never proceeding to stage 3. i.e., do not pass go, go directly to jail. In stage 2, this is now once they've declared you pre-communicable, or your city pre-communicable. In stage 2, this is the apprehension and detention phase. And this is where they sneak in their unlimited, unchecked authority. They've couched this authority by describing how generally they expect it to work in a temporary manner, but they've also clearly stated it's open-ended and there is no discussion of due process in this phase. But again, CDC wants your comments on this. Now, if you want to see how this works out, if this sounds incredible to you, well, in 2011, CDC basically made their own movie. In essence, is what this is. The movie Contagion is basically written for and by the CDC to scare the public into funding them and to showcase how their heroic dream response to an outbreak would unfold. Well, it unfolds exactly like it's described in this Federal Register. Basically, they apprehend and detain the entire city. He's got to watch the movie to see it. It's like a World War II propaganda film. But you can see what their plan is. And the key is here, there is no onus to end the apprehension phase or to proceed on to issuing orders of isolation, quarantine, or conditional release. As such, they can hold you in the apprehension and detention phase indefinitely. You know, it's like in some countries where they can hold you in jail forever until they decide to take you to court. Exact same thing CDC is doing here. It's like a third world dictatorship. In stage 3, this is where they decide finally if they want to issue an order of isolation or quarantine. The CDC gives those who have been ordered to isolation or quarantine one chance in the first 72 hours to ask the CDC to change their minds. After which, unlimited detention is again on the table. What it works out to, the CDC can stop, detain, and jail you anywhere. The other key factors to note is the CDC does not limit this power to the international borders. CDC says it can take such actions anywhere in the USA based on a claim that every action affects interstate travel. CDC claims it can set up checkpoints at any bus or train station in the country or at any location that might affect interstate travel, like maybe your on-ramp to your local interstate. Moreover, CDC claims the simple act of lining up at any CDC checkpoint gives them the irrevocable authority to force you to be screened. And a refusal to be screened may result in your quarantine, isolation, or conditional release. So basically what this means is if you get in line anywhere where there's a CDC checkpoint, whether you know it's there or not, they've got you. You can't turn around and leave. And they go into, here's a quote from the Federal Register, they go into some court documents in a court case where they basically say exactly that for airplanes. That a passenger consents to airport security search by presenting him or herself for boarding, and that such consent may not be revoked by simply walking away. And the CDC is expanding this. It says, thus, in order to protect interstate travel from communicable diseases, CDC intends for this section to apply broadly to all circumstances where individuals may queue with other travelers. Anywhere. Now, CDC believes the rationale for airport security thing may be extended to other forms of transportation. Again, trains, buses, blah, blah, blah. They can do whatever they want. It's also the aspect of forced vaccination. And this is where the CDC wants you to voluntarily agree to stuff. But even if you don't agree, it doesn't matter. You're still holding to it. Quote, CDC may enter an agreement with an individual upon such terms as the CDC considers to be reasonably necessary, indicating that the individual consents to any of the public health measures authorized under this part, including quarantine, isolation, conditional release, medical examination, hospitalization, vaccination, and treatment, provided that the individual's consent shall not be considered as a prerequisite to any exercise of any authority. So even though the CDC believes it can force all the above procedures on individuals and groups, it also uses, quote, voluntary agreements for the sole purpose of making forced actions easier to perform. Anyone breaking these voluntary agreements, even if they didn't agree to them, are subject to criminal prosecution. Quote, individuals who violate the terms of the agreement or the terms of the federal order for quarantine, isolation, or conditional release, even if no agreement is in place between the individual and the government, he or she may be subject to criminal penalties. Surprisingly, the one thing that's left out of this rulemaking is the creation of the CDC's own armed federal police force to carry out these actions. But that can't be far off. Lord, what happened to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Not in CDC's world.